The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dusty general store, and Olivia Edwards gripped her daughter's small hand tighter as she peered through the window at the rough frontier town of Montrose, Colorado, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The year was 1878, and the journey from St. Louis had taken nearly 3 weeks of bone-rattling travel across endless prairie and through mountain passes that made her stomach drop. Her daughter, 3-year-old Emma, had been remarkably patient throughout the ordeal, but now the little girl was whimpering softly, exhausted and frightened by yet another new place. "It's all right, sweetheart," Olivia whispered, smoothing back Emma's dark curls. "We're finally here. This is our new home." The driver opened the door and helped them down, his weathered face kind despite the harsh lines carved by years of sun and wind. "Welcome to Montrose, madam. You the mail-order bride for Jacob Young." Olivia's cheeks flushed. She still felt strange about that term, though it was accurate enough. After her husband Thomas had died 2 years ago from pneumonia, she had struggled to make ends meet in St. Louis. Her family had disowned her for marrying against their wishes, and she had no one to turn to. When she saw the advertisement in the newspaper seeking a bride willing to travel west, she had responded more out of desperation than hope. "Yes, I am," she said, lifting her chin with as much dignity as she could muster. "I'm Olivia Edwards, and this is my daughter Emma." The driver's eyebrows rose slightly. "Daughter, madam? I don't reckon Jacob mentioned expecting a child." Olivia's stomach twisted with anxiety. She had mentioned Emma in her second letter, but perhaps it hadn't arrived before she left St. Louis. Or perhaps Jacob Young had received it and chosen not to respond, hoping she would come anyway and he could send her back. But she had spent nearly all her savings on the journey. If he refused her now, she had nowhere to go. "I wrote to him about Emma," she said firmly. "If there's been some misunderstanding, we can discuss it when I meet him." The driver nodded slowly and retrieved her small trunk from the top of the coach. "Jacob's ranch is about 5 miles outside town. He usually comes in on Saturdays for supplies. Today's Friday, so he might not be here until tomorrow. You can wait at the hotel if you like, or I can get someone to ride out and fetch him." Before Olivia could respond, a tall figure emerged from the general store across the street. Even from a distance, she could see he was a striking man with broad shoulders and a confident stride. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. But as he drew closer, she caught sight of strong features, a straight nose, and eyes the color of dark honey. "That's Jacob now," the driver said, waving to the man. "Jacob, your bride's arrived." Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs as the cowboy stopped in his tracks, his gaze sweeping over her and then dropping to Emma, who had pressed herself against her mother's skirts. For a long moment, he simply stood there, and Olivia couldn't read his expression. Was he angry? Disappointed? Then he walked forward, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair that fell slightly over his forehead. Up close, he was even more handsome than she had initially thought, with a square jaw and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though it wasn't smiling now. "Miss Edwards," he said, his voice deep and measured. "I'm Jacob Young." "Mr. Young," she replied, proud that her voice didn't shake. "This is my daughter, Emma. I mentioned her in my letter. I hope it reached you." Jacob's eyes moved to the little girl again, and something in his expression softened. Emma was peeking up at him from behind Olivia's skirts, her blue eyes wide and uncertain. She had her mother's delicate features but her late father's coloring, with those dark curls that always seemed to have a mind of their own. "It didn't," Jacob said after a moment. "But that's the mail service for you. Can't always be counted on." Olivia's breath caught. "I understand if this changes things. I should have sent the letter earlier, or perhaps multiple letters to ensure you receive the information. If you wish to retract your offer, I won't hold it against you, though I must confess I'm not sure what we'll do." Jacob looked at her directly then, and she was surprised by the warmth in his gaze. "Did you think I'd turn you away because of a child? What kind of man do you take me for?" "I don't know what kind of man you are," Olivia said honestly. "We've exchanged only a few letters. I know you're a rancher, that you're 26 years old, and that you're looking for a wife to help build a life with, but I don't know your character yet." A slight smile tugged at the corner of Jacob's mouth. "Fair enough. Well, let me start by saying I'm not the kind of man who would send a woman and child back into uncertainty. You came all this way in good faith. The least I can do is honor my commitment." He crouched down then, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. "Hello there, Emma. My name's Jacob. I've got a ranch not far from here with horses and cattle and a dog named Scout. Do you like dogs?" Emma nodded shyly, and a tiny smile appeared on her face. "Scout's going to be very happy to meet you," Jacob continued. "He gets lonely sometimes with just me around. And I've got a mare named Rosie who's real gentle. Maybe your mama will let you pet her sometime." "Can I, Mama?" Emma asked, her fear momentarily forgotten. "We'll see," Olivia said, but she felt something loosen in her chest. Whatever else Jacob Young might be, he clearly had kindness in him. Jacob stood and picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing. "My wagon's just down the street. We should head out soon so we can reach the ranch before dark. It's been dry lately, but the road can be tricky in places." As they walked to the wagon, Olivia noticed several townspeople watching them with curiosity. A woman in a fine dress whispered to her companion, and two men outside the saloon openly stared. Olivia held her head high, refusing to be ashamed. She had done nothing wrong. She was simply trying to survive and give her daughter a better life. Jacob loaded the trunk into the back of the wagon and then helped Olivia and Emma onto the seat. His hands were strong but gentle, and Olivia found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her as he took up the reins. The wagon lurched forward and they left Montrose behind, heading into the open country. The landscape was both beautiful and harsh, with scrubby vegetation, distant mountains, and a sky so vast it seemed to swallow everything beneath it. Olivia had never seen anything like it. St. Louis had been crowded and noisy, full of buildings and people. This was wild and empty, and she wasn't sure yet if that thrilled or terrified her. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, partly to break the silence and partly because she genuinely wanted to know. "It's not much yet," Jacob admitted. "I've got about 500 acres, a herd of maybe 100 cattle, and a dozen horses. The house is small but sturdy. I built it myself 3 years ago when I first claimed the land. 2 bedrooms, a main room, and a kitchen. There's a barn and a corral and a creek that runs through the property. Good water year-round." "It sounds lovely," Olivia said, and she meant it. After living in a cramped boarding house in St. Louis, the idea of space and fresh air was appealing. "It's a lot of work," Jacob said. "I won't lie to you about that. Ranch life is hard, especially out here where the weather can turn mean without warning and the nearest neighbor is miles away. But it's honest work, and the land is mine. Nobody can take that away from me." There was something in his voice, a fierce pride mixed with determination, that made Olivia respect him. She understood the desire for independence, for a place to call your own. It was part of what had driven her to respond to his advertisement in the first place. "I'm not afraid of hard work," she said. "I've been supporting myself and Emma for 2 years now. I took in sewing and laundry, worked in a factory for a time. I can cook and clean, and I'm good with numbers. I managed the household accounts when my husband was alive." Jacob glanced at her with what might have been approval. "That's good to know. I'm decent enough at ranching, but I'm not much for keeping track of expenses and such, and I'll admit my cooking leaves a lot to be desired. I can make beans and biscuits without burning them, but that's about the extent of it." Despite her nervousness, Olivia smiled. "Then we'll compliment each other well." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, with Emma dozing against Olivia's side. The rhythmic creaking of the wagon and the clip-clop of the horses' hooves were oddly soothing. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Can I ask you something?" Jacob said eventually. "Of course." "Why did you agree to come west and marry a stranger? You seem like a capable woman. Surely there were other options in St. Louis." Olivia considered how much to tell him. They would be married soon, she supposed, so he deserved honesty. "My husband died 2 years ago. We had very little savings, and I had no family to turn to. My parents had disowned me for marrying Thomas in the first place. He was a clerk, not wealthy enough for their tastes. After he died, I tried to make it on my own, but it was difficult. The work available to women doesn't pay well, and I had Emma to think about. I wanted her to have a better life than what I could give her in the city. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start." Jacob nodded slowly. "I'm sorry about your husband." "That must have been hard." "It was," Olivia said simply. "But life goes on. We do what we must." "And what about love?" Jacob asked, his voice careful. "Did you love him, your first husband?" "Yes," Olivia said, "very much. But I'm not naive enough to think lightning strikes twice. I'm not expecting a love match, Mr. Young. I'm hoping for partnership, respect, and stability for my daughter. If we can build something good together, that will be enough." Jacob was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "You can call me Jacob. And for what it's worth, I think respect and partnership are fine places to start. The rest might come in time." Something in his words made Olivia's heart flutter, but she pushed the feeling aside. It was too soon to hope for more than the practical arrangement they had agreed upon. As the sun touched the horizon, they crested a small hill, and Jacob pointed ahead. "There it is, home." Olivia followed his gaze and saw a cluster of buildings nestled in a small valley. The house was indeed modest, a single-story structure made of wood and stone, but it looked solid and well-maintained. The barn was larger than the house, and she could see several horses in the corral beside it. Smoke curled from the chimney, which surprised her. "I asked my neighbor, Tom Fletcher, to come by and light a fire so the house would be warm when we arrived," Jacob explained. "He and his wife Mary live about 3 miles east. Good people. You'll meet them soon enough." As they drew closer, a large dog came bounding out to meet them, barking joyfully. He was a mixed breed with shaggy brown fur and intelligent eyes, and he danced around the wagon as Jacob brought it to a halt. "That's Scout," Jacob said, jumping down and ruffling the dog's ears. "He's all bark and no bite, don't worry." Emma had woken up and was watching the dog with wide eyes. "He's big," she whispered. "Would you like to pet him?" Jacob asked. Emma looked at her mother for permission, and Olivia nodded. Jacob lifted the little girl down from the wagon, and Scout immediately approached her, tail wagging. To Olivia's surprise, Emma giggled as the dog licked her hand. "He likes you," Jacob said, grinning. "That's a good sign. Scout's an excellent judge of character." Olivia climbed down from the wagon on her own, not wanting to presume on Jacob's help, though she noticed he had moved as if to assist her before stopping himself. The air was cooler here than it had been in town, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Jacob carried her trunk toward the house, and Olivia followed with Emma's hand in hers. Inside, the house was simple but clean. The main room held a stone fireplace with a cheerful fire burning, a rough-hewn table with 4 chairs, and a rocking chair near the hearth. Through one doorway, she could see a small bedroom with a large bed covered in a patchwork quilt. Another doorway led to what must be the second bedroom. "I thought you and Emma could take the larger bedroom," Jacob said, setting the trunk down. "I'll sleep in the smaller one. The kitchen's through here." He led them to a small but functional kitchen with a cast iron stove, a dry sink, and shelves holding dishes and supplies. It wasn't fancy, but it was far better than what Olivia had hoped for. "It's wonderful," she said sincerely. "Thank you, Jacob." He looked pleased. "You're welcome. I know it's not much, but I've tried to make it comfortable. There's a well just outside for water, and the privy's about 50 yards behind the house. I've been meaning to build a bathing room, but I haven't gotten around to it yet." "We'll manage just fine," Olivia assured him. Emma tugged on her mother's skirt. "Mama, I'm hungry." "Of course you are, sweetheart. Let me see what I can prepare for supper." "I brought some provisions from town," Jacob said. "There's fresh bread, cheese, and some ham. Nothing fancy, but it'll do for tonight. Tomorrow I can show you where everything is, and you can tell me what supplies you need." They sat down to a simple meal, and Olivia was struck by how surreal the situation was. Just this morning, she had woken up in a stagecoach, uncertain of her future. Now she was sitting in a ranch house in Colorado, eating supper with a man she barely knew but who would soon be her husband. Jacob was good with Emma, asking her simple questions about her favorite things and telling her stories about the ranch. The little girl warmed to him quickly, her earlier shyness fading. Olivia watched them together and felt a cautious hope beginning to bloom in her chest. After supper, she got Emma ready for bed in the larger bedroom. The room was sparse but had clearly been prepared for their arrival. There were fresh linens on the bed, and someone had even put a small rag doll on the pillow. Olivia suspected Jacob had bought it in town. "You like it here, Emma?" Olivia asked as she tucked her daughter in. "I like Scout," Emma said sleepily. "And Jacob is nice. Is he going to be my new papa?" Olivia's throat tightened. "Would you like that?" Emma nodded, her eyes already drifting closed. "Papa Thomas went to heaven. Mama said so, but maybe Jacob can be my papa here." "Maybe," Olivia whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Sleep now, sweetheart." When she returned to the main room, Jacob was sitting in the rocking chair, staring into the fire. He looked up as she entered. "Is she settled?" he asked. "Fast asleep. The journey exhausted her." Olivia hesitated, then sat in one of the chairs near the fireplace. "Thank you for the doll." "That was very thoughtful." Jacob looked slightly embarrassed. "I wasn't sure what a little girl would like. The shopkeeper's wife suggested it. It was perfect." Olivia folded her hands in her lap, suddenly nervous. "Jacob, we should discuss the practical matters. The marriage, I mean. When did you want to have the ceremony? And what are your expectations of me?" Jacob leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I thought we could go into town next Saturday and have the minister perform the ceremony. Simple and quick. As for expectations, I suppose I'm hoping for what I said in my letters. A partner to help build this ranch into something lasting. Someone to share the work and the life with. I'm not an unreasonable man, Olivia. I won't demand anything you're not willing to give." His words were careful, and Olivia understood what he was leaving unsaid. He was giving her time, not expecting her to fulfill wifely duties immediately. She was grateful for that consideration. "That seems fair," she said, "and I promise to do my part. I'll take care of the house and the cooking, help with the ranch work where I can, and manage the household accounts if you'd like." "I'd like that very much." Jacob smiled at her, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "I know this isn't a conventional situation, Olivia, but I think we can make it work." "So do I," she said, and she meant it. They talked for a while longer, discussing the daily routine of the ranch and what would be expected. Jacob explained that he usually rose before dawn to tend the animals, spent most of the day working the land or mending fences, or handling the 100 other tasks that came with running a ranch, and returned to the house for supper at dusk. It was a hard life, but there was a simplicity to it that appealed to Olivia. Finally, exhaustion caught up with her, and she excused herself to bed. As she lay beside Emma in the darkness, listening to her daughter's soft breathing, Olivia reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been struggling to pay rent in St. Louis, wondering how she would feed her daughter. Now she was in Colorado, about to marry a cowboy she had just met, with a real chance at building a new life. She fell asleep thinking of Jacob's kind eyes and the way he had crouched down to speak to Emma at her level, and she allowed herself to hope that perhaps this gamble would pay off after all. The next morning, Olivia woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and pale sunlight filtering through the window. Emma was still asleep beside her, so she slipped out of bed quietly and dressed in one of her simple day dresses. The house was silent, and when she peered out the window, she saw Jacob leading a horse from the barn. She made her way to the kitchen, and was pleased to find that Jacob had left the fire banked, so it was easy to coax back to life. She found coffee, flour, eggs, and lard and set about making breakfast. By the time Jacob came in from his morning chores, she had biscuits baking and eggs frying, and the coffee was hot and strong. "That smells incredible," Jacob said, washing his hands in the basin near the door. "I didn't expect you to have breakfast ready so early." "I'm used to early mornings," Olivia said, plating the food. "Emma will sleep a bit longer, I think. She's exhausted from the journey." They sat down together, and Jacob ate with obvious appreciation. "This is the best breakfast I've had in months, maybe years." "You're a fine cook, Olivia." "Thank you. It's nothing fancy, but I learned to make do with simple ingredients." As they ate, Jacob told her about the work he needed to do that day. Several sections of fence needed mending, and he wanted to check on the cattle in the far pasture. "You're welcome to come along if you'd like to see the property," he said, "or you can stay here and settle in, whatever you prefer." "I think Emma and I will stay here today," Olivia said. "I'd like to get our things organized and learn my way around the house and immediate area. Perhaps tomorrow we could tour the property." "That sounds good. If you need anything, just ring the bell outside the kitchen door. I'll hear it and come running." After breakfast, Jacob headed back out, and Olivia began exploring her new home more thoroughly. She found that Jacob had stocked the pantry reasonably well, though it was clear he had been buying the basics and not much else. She made a mental list of things they would need, including more vegetables, herbs for cooking, and various household supplies. Emma woke mid-morning and was delighted to be allowed to play with Scout in the yard while Olivia worked. The dog seemed to have adopted the little girl as his special charge, staying close to her and following her around as she explored. Olivia spent the day cleaning and organizing, and by evening, the house felt more like a home. She had moved a few things around to make the kitchen more efficient, had washed and hung curtains that she found stored in a trunk, and had even placed some wildflowers she had picked in a jar on the table. When Jacob came in for supper, he stopped in the doorway and looked around with surprise. "You've been busy. The place looks different, better." "I hope you don't mind that I rearranged a few things," Olivia said, suddenly worried that she had overstepped. "Mind, I'm grateful. I never had much of a knack for making a house feel like a home. It was just a place to sleep between work. But this feels welcoming now." That night, after Emma was in bed, Olivia and Jacob sat by the fire again, and this time the conversation came more easily. Jacob told her about growing up in Kansas, about how he had come west seeking land of his own after his parents died. He had worked as a ranch hand for several years, saving every penny until he had enough to file a claim and buy some cattle. "I always dreamed of having my own place," he said. "Somewhere I could build something lasting, but it gets lonely out here. I realized I wanted someone to share it with, to build it for. That's why I placed the advertisement." "Were you ever in love before?" Olivia asked, then immediately wished she could take the question back. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's all right. We should get to know each other." Jacob stared into the fire. "There was a girl back in Kansas, Sarah. We were young, maybe 17 or 18. I thought I was in love, but her family didn't approve of me. I was just a ranch hand with no prospects. She married a banker instead. I heard they moved to Topeka. I was hurt at the time, but looking back, I think it was for the best. We wanted different things." "I'm sorry you were hurt," Olivia said softly. "It was a long time ago. What about you? You said you loved your first husband. What was he like?" Olivia smiled, though it was touched with sadness. "Thomas was kind and gentle. He loved books and music. He wasn't particularly strong or adventurous, but he treated me with respect and made me laugh. We were happy, even though we didn't have much money. When he got sick, I nursed him as best I could, but the pneumonia was too much. He died in the winter of 1876, just after Emma's first birthday. That must have been terrible for you." "It was. But I had Emma to think about, and she kept me going. She's the reason I'm here now. I wanted to give her a better life than I could provide in the city." Jacob looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "She's lucky to have a mother who loves her so much. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you came, Olivia, both of you." His words warmed her, and she found herself smiling. "I'm glad we came too." The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jacob worked the ranch from sunup to sundown, and Olivia managed the household. She cooked meals that Jacob praised lavishly, kept the house clean and organized, and began planting a small vegetable garden near the house. Emma thrived in the open air and sunshine, losing the pale, pinched look she had developed in the cramped boarding house in St. Louis. True to his word, Jacob took them on a tour of the property that first weekend, showing them the creek where he got water for the animals, the pastures where the cattle grazed, and the far boundaries of his land. Olivia was struck by how much work went into maintaining the ranch, and she gained a new respect for what Jacob had accomplished on his own. On Saturday, they drove into Montrose for the wedding ceremony. It was a simple affair at the small church, with the minister's wife and the general store owner as witnesses. Olivia wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and Jacob wore clean trousers and a white shirt. Emma stood between them, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. The ceremony was brief, and when the minister pronounced them man and wife, Jacob gave Olivia a chaste kiss on the cheek. She felt a flutter of something in her chest, but she told herself it was just nerves. Afterward, they had a simple meal at the hotel restaurant, and several townspeople came by to offer their congratulations. Olivia met Tom and Mary Fletcher, the neighbors Jacob had mentioned, and was relieved to find them friendly and welcoming. Mary was a plump, cheerful woman in her 40s who immediately took to Emma. "You must come for supper next week," Mary insisted. "It'll be good for you to have some women friends out here, Olivia. Ranch life can be isolating if you let it be." "I'd like that very much," Olivia said gratefully. On the ride back to the ranch, now officially as husband and wife, Jacob seemed thoughtful. "I know this isn't the wedding you probably dreamed of as a girl," he said. "No fancy dress or big celebration." "It was perfect," Olivia said honestly. "I don't need fancy things, Jacob. I just need security and kindness, and you've given me both." That night, after Emma was asleep, Jacob stood awkwardly in the main room, clearly uncertain of what to do. Olivia took pity on him. "I'll sleep in the bedroom with Emma as before," she said gently. "There's no need to rush anything, Jacob. We're married legally, but we're still getting to know each other. Let's take our time." The relief on his face was evident. "Thank you for understanding. I want you to be comfortable here, Olivia. I want you to be happy." "I am," she said, and she realized it was true. She was happier here than she had been in months, maybe years. As the weeks passed, Olivia settled more deeply into her new life. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the signs of changing weather, and the needs of the animals. She helped Jacob with tasks like feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, and even assisting with the milking when he bought a cow from a neighbor. Emma flourished, growing rosy-cheeked and energetic. She followed Jacob around whenever he allowed it, chattering away about everything she saw. Jacob was endlessly patient with her, answering her questions and teaching her about the animals. Olivia often watched them together, her heart swelling with affection. She tried not to think too deeply about her growing feelings for Jacob. He was kind, hardworking, and good with her daughter. He made her laugh with his dry observations about the ranch hands he occasionally hired for big jobs or the quirks of the animals. He was also handsome in a rugged way that made her pulse quicken when he came in from a day's work, his shirt clinging to his broad shoulders. But she didn't know if he felt the same way about her. He was always respectful, never pushing for more than she offered, but he also kept a certain distance. He never touched her beyond the occasional brush of hands or a steadying grip on her elbow when the ground was uneven. She told herself she should be grateful for his restraint, but a part of her wondered if he simply didn't find her attractive. One evening in late June, about 6 weeks after their arrival, Jacob came in from work looking troubled. Olivia was preparing supper, and Emma was playing with Scout on the floor. "Is something wrong?" Olivia asked. Jacob removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair. "There's been some trouble with rustlers in the area. Tom Fletcher lost 10 head of cattle last week, and I heard in town today that the Morrison Ranch was hit too. I'm worried they might come here next." Olivia's stomach clenched with fear. "What can we do?" "I'm going to start keeping watch at night, at least for a while. And I'm going to move the herd closer to the house so I can keep an eye on them. I hate to worry you, but I wanted you to know. If you see or hear anything unusual, ring the bell immediately." "I will," Olivia promised. "Is there anything else I can do to help?" Jacob looked at her with what might have been admiration. "You're not scared." "Of course I'm scared. But fear doesn't solve problems. Action does." That night, after Emma was asleep, Olivia stayed up with Jacob, sitting by the window while he cleaned his rifle. The domesticity of the scene struck her. Just a few months ago, she had been alone and struggling. Now she had a husband, a home, and a life that felt real and solid. "Jacob," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? With this arrangement, I mean." "With Emma and me being here?" Jacob looked up from the rifle, his eyes serious. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Olivia. I was lonely before you came. I didn't realize how lonely until I had you both here, and suddenly the house felt alive. Emma's laughter, the smell of your cooking, the way you've made this place a home, it's more than I hoped for." Olivia's breath caught. "Truly, truly." He set the rifle aside and stood, crossing to where she sat. "I know we married out of practicality, but I want you to know that I care about you, about both of you. You're not just my wife on paper, Olivia. You're becoming important to me." She stood as well, her heart pounding. "You're becoming important to me too, Jacob, more than I expected." They stood close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, truly kiss her, But then Scout barked outside and the moment broke. Jacob moved to the window, his hand on his rifle. Probably just a coyote, but I should check. He went outside, and Olivia pressed a hand to her racing heart, wondering what might have happened if they hadn't been interrupted. The next few nights were tense as Jacob kept watch, but no rustlers appeared. The other ranchers organized patrols, taking turns watching over the most vulnerable properties, and eventually the trouble seemed to pass. Tom Fletcher reported that the sheriff had tracked the rustlers to a camp in the mountains and arrested them, bringing relief to the whole area. With the immediate danger gone, life returned to normal, but something had shifted between Olivia and Jacob. They were more aware of each other, their conversations more personal, their accidental touches more charged. Olivia caught Jacob watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her skin tingle, and she knew her own gaze lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking. One Sunday in July, they attended the small church in Montrose, and afterward, they went on a picnic by the creek on their property. Emma played in the shallow water while Olivia and Jacob sat on a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree. "This is nice," Olivia said, watching Emma splash and giggle. "Peaceful." "It is," Jacob agreed. He was lying back on the blanket, his hat tipped over his eyes, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "We should do this more often. Take time to just enjoy what we're building here. I'd like that." Olivia plucked a blade of grass and twirled it between her fingers. "Jacob, can I tell you something? Anything? When I first came here, I was so frightened. I had gambled everything on a stranger's advertisement in a newspaper, and I didn't know if I'd made a terrible mistake. But now, I can't imagine being anywhere else. You've given Emma and me a real home, and I'm grateful every day." Jacob pushed his hat back and sat up, looking at her intently. "You don't need to be grateful, Olivia. You've given me just as much. Before you came, this ranch was just land and animals. Now it feels like a real home, like something worth fighting for. And Emma, she's brought so much joy. I never knew I could love a child who wasn't mine by blood, but I do. I love her like she's my own daughter." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "That means everything to me, Jacob." "She's already started calling you Papa Jacob when she thinks we can't hear." Jacob's face softened. "I've heard her. It makes my heart swell every time." Without thinking, Olivia reached out and took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something. I know we married for practical reasons, and I've tried to respect that. But the truth is, I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so brave and determined with Emma holding your hand. I don't expect you to feel the same way, but I needed you to know." Olivia's heart soared. "Oh, Jacob, I'm falling in love with you too. I've been trying not to, trying to keep things practical, but I can't help it. You're everything I didn't know I needed. You're strong and kind and patient, and you treat my daughter like she's precious. How could I not love you?" Jacob cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Can I kiss you?" "Really kiss you, please," Olivia whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she didn't want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, tentative, but then it deepened, and Olivia felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks." "So have I," Olivia admitted. They heard Emma splashing in the creek and pulled apart, laughing a bit breathlessly. Emma was chasing a frog, completely oblivious to her mother and Jacob's moment. "We should probably keep an eye on her," Jacob said reluctantly. "Probably," Olivia agreed, but she kept her hand in his and he squeezed it gently. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. They were no longer just partners in a practical arrangement. They were a couple, truly married in heart as well as law. Jacob moved his things into the larger bedroom, and they began sharing a bed, though he was always gentle and considerate, never pushing Olivia beyond what she was comfortable with. Their physical relationship deepened over the following weeks, and Olivia found joy in their intimacy. Jacob was a thoughtful lover, attentive to her needs and patient as they learned each other. She had loved her first husband, but this was different. Jacob was different. He was strong where Thomas had been gentle, confident where Thomas had been hesitant. And their love had been forged through shared work and mutual respect, which made it feel solid and real. As summer turned to autumn, Olivia realized she had never been happier. The ranch was thriving, with the cattle healthy and fat and the hay harvest abundant. Emma was growing like a weed, her vocabulary expanding daily, and her bond with Jacob deepening. And Olivia herself felt more alive than she had in years. One morning in late September, Olivia woke feeling queasy. She barely made it outside before losing the contents of her stomach. Jacob found her sitting on the porch steps, pale and shaky. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" he asked, kneeling beside her in concern. "I don't think I'm sick," Olivia said slowly, realization dawning. "Jacob, I think I might be pregnant." Jacob's eyes widened and then a grin spread across his face. "Pregnant? Really? We're going to have a baby, I think so. I'll need to see the doctor to be sure, but all the signs are there." Jacob pulled her into his arms, laughing with joy. "A baby? Olivia, this is wonderful. Emma's going to be a big sister." They told Emma that evening, and the little girl was thrilled at the idea of a baby brother or sister. "Can we name it after Scout if it's a boy?" she asked seriously. "We'll think about it," Jacob said, trying not to laugh. Over the next months, as Olivia's pregnancy progressed, Jacob was attentive and protective. He insisted she rest more, took over some of her household tasks, and fretted over every little thing. It was endearing, if sometimes exasperating. "I'm not made of glass, Jacob," she said one day when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "I know, but you're my wife, and I want to take care of you." She softened at his words and kissed him gently. "And I love you for it, but I promise I'll tell you if I need help." Winter came, blanketing the ranch in snow. It was Emma's first real winter in the country, and she was enchanted by the white landscape. Jacob took her sledding on a gentle slope near the house, and they built snowmen together while Olivia watched from the window, her hand resting on her growing belly. Christmas was a simple but joyful affair. Jacob cut a small pine tree and brought it into the house, and Olivia strung popcorn and berries to decorate it. They didn't have money for extravagant gifts, but Jacob carved Emma a small wooden horse, and Olivia made her a new dress from fabric she had bought in town. For Jacob, Olivia knitted a warm scarf and a pair of gloves, and he was genuinely touched by the gift. "I have something for you too," he said, pulling a small package from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver locket. Olivia opened it to find 2 tiny spaces for photographs. "I thought you could put pictures of Emma and the baby in it once the baby comes," Jacob explained. "So you always have your children close to your heart." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful, Jacob, thank you." He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle on her skin. "I love you, Olivia, more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," she whispered. In late March of 1879, Olivia went into labor. Jacob rode for the doctor and Mary Fletcher, who had agreed to assist with the birth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Jacob paced outside the bedroom, his face drawn with worry, while Tom Fletcher tried to distract him with talk of the spring planting. Finally, as the sun began to set on the second day, they heard a baby's cry. Jacob burst into the room to find Olivia exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "It's a boy," Mary announced happily. "A healthy baby boy." Jacob approached the bed almost reverently, gazing down at his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was wailing lustily, his little fists waving in the air. "He's perfect," Jacob said, his voice choked with emotion. "You're perfect. Thank you, Olivia." They named him James after Jacob's father. Emma was allowed in to meet her brother, and she stared at him in wonder. "He's so small," she whispered. "Can I hold him?" With supervision, Emma held her baby brother, and the look of awe on her face made both Olivia and Jacob's eyes fill with tears. "Now I have a family complete," Jacob said, gathering all of them in his arms as best he could. "A wife I love, a daughter who has my heart, and a son to carry on the family name. I'm the luckiest man alive." "We're the lucky ones," Olivia said, leaning against him. "You took a chance on a mail-order bride with a toddler in tow, and you never made us feel like anything but wanted and loved." The months after James's birth were busy and exhausting. Olivia was nursing the baby and managing the household, while Jacob worked the ranch and doted on both his children. Emma proved to be a helpful big sister, fetching diapers and entertaining James when Olivia needed a moment to rest. As spring turned to summer and summer to autumn, the young family thrived. The ranch continued to grow, with Jacob hiring a ranch hand named Pete to help with the increased workload. Emma started learning her letters from Olivia, showing a quick intelligence that delighted both her parents. And James grew into a plump, happy baby who rarely cried and smiled at everyone. One evening in October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jacob pulled Olivia close. Emma was playing in the yard with Scout, and James was sleeping in Olivia's arms. "You remember the day you arrived?" Jacob asked. "When you stepped off that stagecoach looking so worried and brave." "I was terrified," Olivia admitted. "I didn't know if you would accept Emma, and I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't imagine turning you away, and now I can't imagine life without any of you. You know, when I placed that advertisement for a bride, I thought I was looking for someone to cook and clean, to make the house run smoothly. I didn't expect to find love, but that's what I got. Real, deep, lasting love." Olivia smiled up at him. "I came west looking for security and a fresh start. I found that, but I also found something I didn't think I'd ever have again. A true partner, a man who loves me and my daughter unconditionally, and a home that feels like it's exactly where I'm meant to be." "You are exactly where you're meant to be," Jacob said, kissing the top of her head. "All of you." The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered, allowing Jacob to expand his herd and his land holdings. Emma grew into a bright, confident girl who could ride a horse as well as any ranch hand and who loved helping her father with the cattle. James became a sturdy toddler with his father's brown eyes and his mother's smile. In 1881, Olivia gave birth to another child, a daughter they named Julia. She had Jacob's brown hair and Olivia's blue eyes, and she was doted on by her older siblings. Emma took her role as big sister seriously, helping to care for both James and Julia with a maturity beyond her years. The young family became well known and respected in Montrose and the surrounding area. Olivia was active in the church and the small community, helping to establish a school where Emma and eventually the other children could be educated. Jacob served on the Cattlemen's Association board, working to improve conditions for all the ranchers in the region. But despite their growing responsibilities and the demands of the ranch, Jacob and Olivia always made time for each other. They still took picnics by the creek on Sundays when weather permitted. They still sat by the fire in the evenings, talking about their days and making plans for the future. And they still loved each other with an intensity that had only deepened over time. One evening in the spring of 1883, when Emma was 8, James was 4, and Julia was nearly 2, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It had become a tradition of sorts, this evening ritual of being together before bedtime. Emma was reading aloud from a book of fairy tales, her voice clear and confident. James was playing with wooden animals Jacob had carved for him, making up elaborate stories about their adventures. Julia was toddling around the porch, chasing Scout and giggling when the patient dog let her catch him. Olivia sat in the rocking chair Jacob had made for her when she was pregnant with James, watching her children with contentment. Jacob stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Incredibly happy," Olivia replied. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is my life. 5 years ago I was struggling in St. Louis, wondering how I would survive. Now I have everything I ever wanted and more." "We've built something good here," Jacob agreed. "A real legacy to pass on to our children." Emma looked up from her book. "Papa Jacob, will you tell us again about the day Mama and I arrived?" It was a story the children never tired of hearing. Jacob settled into a chair and pulled James onto his lap while Emma and Julia gathered close. "Well," Jacob began, his eyes twinkling, "it was a warm day in May, and I had gone into town for supplies. I knew the mail-order bride I had been corresponding with was due to arrive, but I was nervous. What if we didn't like each other? What if it was all a terrible mistake?" "But it wasn't a mistake," James interjected, as he always did. "No, it wasn't," Jacob agreed. "Because when that stagecoach stopped and the door opened, out stepped the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had blue eyes that looked brave even though I could tell she was scared, and she was holding the hand of a little girl with dark curls." "That was me," Emma said, grinning. "That was you," Jacob confirmed. "And I remember thinking, this is it. This is my family. I didn't know you yet, didn't know your mother yet, but I knew in my heart that you belonged with me." "And then what happened?" Julia asked, even though she had heard the story many times. "Then your mama told me about Emma, and I got to meet this wonderful little girl who loved dogs and horses. And I brought them home to the ranch, and we started building our life together. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it." Olivia reached up and took Jacob's hand, squeezing it gently. He squeezed back, and their eyes met over the children's heads, full of love and understanding. Later, after the children were in bed, Jacob and Olivia stood on the porch under the stars. The night was clear and cool, and the sky was brilliant with countless pinpoints of light. "You have any regrets?" Jacob asked. "About leaving St. Louis, about marrying a stranger, about coming to this hard land?" "Not a single one," Olivia said firmly. "Every choice I made led me here to you, to this life. How could I regret that? Even the hard parts, the isolation, the work, the dangers, even those. They made us stronger, Jacob. They showed us what we were capable of together." Jacob pulled her into his arms, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Olivia Young, more with every passing day. And I love you, Jacob Young. Thank you for taking a chance on a mail-order bride who came with a toddler in tow. Thank you for making me the happiest man alive. The day you and Emma arrived was the day my life truly began. Before that, I was just existing. Now I'm living." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the love they had found and the family they had built together. As the years continued to unfold, the Young Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Jacob's hard work and Olivia's careful management of their resources paid off. They were able to hire more help, which eased the physical burden on Jacob and gave him more time with his family. Emma grew into a lovely young woman, intelligent and capable. She had her mother's practical nature and her father's determination. When she turned 16 in 1886, young men from neighboring ranches started calling, but she made it clear she wasn't in any hurry to marry. She wanted to travel first, to see more of the world than just Colorado. "I'm not against marriage," she told her parents. "I just want to make sure when I do marry it's for love like you two. I want what you have." "Then take your time," Olivia advised. "The right person will wait for you, and if they won't wait, they're not the right person." James showed signs of being a natural rancher, with an affinity for animals and a love of the land. Even as a young boy, he was always asking Jacob questions about the cattle, the horses, the best way to manage the property. Jacob took pride in teaching his son, knowing that one day James would take over the ranch and continue what they had built. Julia was the artistic one, always drawing or singing or making up stories. She was the dreamer of the family, but her dreams were no less valuable. She saw beauty everywhere and helped the rest of them remember to pause and appreciate it. In 1887, Olivia found out she was pregnant again. She was 32 years old, and this pregnancy was unexpected but welcome. Jacob was thrilled at the idea of another child, though he worried about Olivia more this time, remembering how difficult James's birth had been. "I'm fine," Olivia assured him. "Worried old mother hen." "I prefer concerned protective husband," Jacob retorted, but he was smiling. This pregnancy was easier than the others, and in early 1888, Olivia gave birth to twin boys. They named them Matthew and Michael, and the arrival of twins caused quite a stir in the family and the community. Suddenly, the young household was even more chaotic, but it was a joyful chaos. Emma, now 12 when the twins were born, took charge of helping with them in a way that showed her growing maturity. James, at 9, was less interested in babies but dutifully helped where needed. And Julia, at 7, treated them like living dolls, always wanting to play with them and sing to them. Jacob often stood back and watched his large, boisterous family with amazement. "6 children," he said to Olivia one night as they finally collapsed into bed, exhausted from a long day. "When I placed that advertisement, I was hoping for 1 child eventually, maybe 2. Now I have 6, 7 if you count Scout, which Emma insists we should." "Are you complaining?" Olivia asked, though she was smiling. "Not for a second. I'm thanking my lucky stars, every single one of them." As the 1880s drew to a close and the 1890s began, the young family continued to flourish. Emma eventually did find love, marrying a young lawyer from Denver who visited Montrose on business. His name was William, and he fell head over heels for Emma's intelligence and independence. They married in 1891, and while they settled in Denver, they visited the ranch often. James took on more responsibility at the ranch, working alongside his father and learning everything he could. He was 17 now, nearly a man, and Jacob trusted him with increasingly important decisions. Julia discovered a talent for teaching and began helping at the local school, working with the younger children. The twins, Matthew and Michael, were mirror images of each other, with identical brown eyes and matching grins. They were mischievous but good-hearted, keeping everyone on their toes. And through it all, Jacob and Olivia's love remained the foundation of the family. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had built a life from nothing, created a legacy that would endure for generations. One evening in the summer of 1895, 17 years after Olivia had first arrived in Montrose, The entire family gathered at the ranch for Emma's birthday. She was 20, married and pregnant with her first child. James was 16, tall and strong and every inch his father's son. Julia was 14, beautiful and creative and full of dreams. The twins were 7, still mischievous but showing signs of the men they would become. After dinner, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Jacob stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, "to family, to the life we've built together, and especially to Olivia, who took a chance on a lonely cowboy 17 years ago and gave me everything I ever wanted." "Hear, hear," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm the one who should be thanking you, Jacob. You took in a desperate widow with a child and made us feel loved and wanted from the very first day. You never treated Emma as anything less than your own daughter. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible." Emma spoke up, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "I want my child to know the story of how you two came together. How Mama arrived on the stage coach with me in tow, and how Papa Jacob looked at us and said, 'Now I have a family complete.' I want them to know that true love exists, that it can be found in the most unexpected places, and that it's worth fighting for." "Did I say that?" Jacob asked, looking surprised. "I don't remember saying that." "You said it that first night," Olivia said softly. "After Emma was asleep and we were talking by the fire. You said you had always wanted a family and now you felt complete." Jacob smiled at the memory. "I did feel complete, still do, more than complete actually, overflowing." As the evening wore on and the family laughed and talked and enjoyed being together, Jacob and Olivia found a quiet moment alone. They walked to their favorite spot by the creek, where they had shared their first kiss all those years ago. "You remember that picnic?" Olivia asked. "When you told me you were falling in love with me." "I remember everything about that day," Jacob said. "I was so nervous. I thought you might not feel the same way, that I was risking our comfortable partnership for something uncertain. I'm glad you took the risk. So am I." Jacob pulled her close, and even after all these years, the feel of her in his arms still felt right. "You know, I used to think I was rescuing you when you came here. A desperate woman with a child, needing a husband for protection and security. But the truth is, you rescued me. I was lonely and adrift, working myself to the bone for no real purpose. You gave me a reason to build, to dream, to hope. You and Emma, and then all our other children. You gave me a life worth living." "We rescued each other," Olivia said. "That's what love does. It makes us both stronger." They stood there as darkness fell, holding each other and watching the stars emerge one by one. Behind them, they could hear their children's laughter floating from the house, the sound of family and joy and home. "The mail-order bride came with a toddler in tow," Jacob said softly, echoing the story that had become family legend. "And the cowboy said, 'Now I have a family complete.' It's a good story, isn't it?" "It's the best story," Olivia agreed. "Because it's ours and it's true and it has a happy ending." "Not an ending," Jacob corrected. "Happy continuation. Our story isn't over yet." "No," Olivia said, smiling up at him. "It's not over yet, and I can't wait to see what comes next." They kissed under the stars, surrounded by the land they had tamed together, the home they had built, and the family they had created. It was a perfect moment, one of thousands they had shared and thousands more they would share in the years to come. The young ranch continued to prosper into the new century. When Jacob and Olivia celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, all their children gathered to honor them. Emma came from Denver with her husband William and their 3 children. James, now married to a local rancher's daughter named Catherine, had taken over the day-to-day running of the ranch and was doing an excellent job. Julia had married a teacher and was living in Colorado Springs, where she taught music to children. The twins, Matthew and Michael, were in their early 20s now, both working on the ranch alongside James and planning to eventually stake their own claims nearby. The celebration was grand by their standards, with friends and neighbors coming from miles around to congratulate the couple who had become pillars of the community. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. But the best moment came when Jacob and Olivia snuck away from the party for a few minutes, walking hand in hand to the creek that had been witness to so many important moments in their lives. 25 years, Olivia marveled. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I arrived on that stagecoach, scared and uncertain. Other times it feels like I've been here forever, like I was always meant to be here. You were always meant to be here, Jacob said. I'm convinced of that. Fate, destiny, divine providence, whatever you want to call it. You were meant to see that advertisement, meant to respond, meant to come west. And I was meant to be waiting for you. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come, if I'd found another solution in St. Louis, or if you'd chosen a different bride? No, Jacob said firmly, because I can't imagine any other life than this one. Every gray hair, every wrinkle, every scar and callus, they all have meaning because they were earned building this life with you. I wouldn't trade a single moment. Olivia leaned against him, feeling the solid strength of him that had been her anchor for 25 years. I love you, Jacob Young, more than I did on our wedding day, more than I did when James was born, more than yesterday. My love for you just keeps growing. And I love you, Olivia Young. You're my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. Thank you for saying yes to a lonely Cowboy's advertisement. Thank you for coming west with your daughter. Thank you for building this incredible life with me. They stood there for a long time, two people who had started as strangers, become partners, and grown into soulmates. Their journey hadn't always been easy. There had been hard times, lean years, moments of fear and uncertainty. But they had faced everything together, and that had made all the difference. As they walked back to the party, Jacob's arm around Olivia's waist, they could see their children and grandchildren laughing and dancing in the lantern light. The ranch house, so much larger now than the small structure Jacob had built alone, glowed with warmth and welcome. The barn and outbuildings stood solid against the night sky. And beyond, the land stretched out in all directions, the land they had worked and nurtured and loved. Look at what we built, Jacob said, his voice full of wonder. Not just the ranch, but all of this. The family, the community, the legacy. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. We built it together, Olivia said. That's what makes it beautiful. As they rejoined the celebration, their children rushed to greet them. Emma hugged her mother while James clapped his father on the back. Julia linked arms with Olivia while the twins dragged Jacob toward the dance floor. The grandchildren climbed on both of them, demanding stories and attention. This was their life. Loud, chaotic, messy, and absolutely perfect. Years continued to pass, and Jacob and Olivia grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They became grandparents many times over and eventually great-grandparents. They watched their children build their own lives, make their own choices, create their own legacies. Emma's children grew up to be lawyers and teachers. James's children became ranchers, continuing the tradition their grandfather had started. Julia's children were artists and musicians. The twins both had large families who settled near Montrose, expanding the young family's presence in the region. Through it all, Jacob and Olivia remained the heart of the family. Their love story became the stuff of family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of the mail-order bride who arrived with a toddler in tow, and the cowboy who looked at them and knew he had found his family complete. In the spring of 1918, Jacob and Olivia celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. They were both in their 60s now, their hair completely gray, their faces lined with age. But their eyes still sparkled when they looked at each other, and their hands still sought each other out automatically. The celebration was smaller this time, just close family at the ranch house. The younger generations had organized everything, insisting that Jacob and Olivia simply enjoy the day. As the sun set on that spring evening, Jacob and Olivia sat together on the porch in matching rocking chairs, blankets over their laps despite the relatively mild weather. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren filled the house and yard, their voices and laughter a constant background hum. 40 years, Jacob said, shaking his head. Where did the time go? Into living, Olivia said simply. Into loving and working and building. Into raising children and watching them raise their own children. Into thousands of small moments that added up to a lifetime. The best lifetime, Jacob said. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. I meant what I said that first night, you know. When you and Emma arrived, I felt complete in a way I never had before, like all the pieces of my life suddenly fell into place. I felt the same way, Olivia admitted. Even though I was terrified, even though everything was strange and new, there was something about you and this place that felt like home, like I was finally where I belonged. One of their great-grandchildren, a little girl of about 4 named Rose, wandered over to them. Grandma Olivia, Grandpa Jacob, tell us the story again, about when you met. It was a request they received often, and they never tired of fulfilling it. Jacob lifted Rose onto his lap while Olivia gathered a few of the other small children around them. Well, Jacob began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. It was 40 years ago in the spring of 1878. I was a young cowboy with a ranch and big dreams, but I was lonely. So I placed an advertisement in a newspaper back east, looking for a bride willing to come west and build a life with me. And Grandma Olivia saw it. One of the children chimed in. That's right, Olivia continued. I was in St. Louis with my daughter Emma, who was just 3 years old then. My first husband had died, and I was struggling to make ends meet. When I saw Jacob's advertisement, I decided to take a chance. So Emma and I got on a stagecoach and traveled for 3 weeks to get to Montrose, Colorado. And then what happened? Rose asked, even though she knew the story by heart. Then I stood in the middle of Montrose, watching the stagecoach arrive, nervous as a cat, Jacob said. And when your grandmother stepped down with Emma holding her hand, I knew immediately that my life was about to change. He was so kind to me, Emma's voice came from the doorway. She was 60 now, a grandmother herself, but she still loved hearing her parents tell their story. I was frightened and tired from the journey, but Jacob got down to my level and talked to me about dogs and horses, and I knew right away that he was a good man. And then Papa Jacob brought us to the ranch, Olivia continued, and we started building our life together. It wasn't always easy. There were hard times and scary times, but we had each other, and that made everything possible. Did you love each other right away? Another child asked. Jacob and Olivia looked at each other, a lifetime of love and understanding passing between them in that glance. I think we did, Jacob said slowly. But it took us a while to realize it. Love grew between us like a seed planted in good soil. Every kindness, every shared task, every conversation and laugh and moment of support, those were like water and sunshine helping that love grow strong and deep. And now look at us, Olivia said, gesturing to the crowd of family around them. 40 years later with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all because two strangers took a chance on each other in a wild frontier town. As the evening grew late and the celebration wound down, Jacob and Olivia finally found themselves alone on the porch. The house had quieted, with the young children put to bed and the adults settling into comfortable conversations inside. "Thank you," Olivia said softly. "For what?" Jacob asked. "For everything. For accepting Emma from the very first moment. For never making me feel like I was a burden or an obligation. For building this incredible life with me. For 40 years of love and partnership and joy." Jacob turned to look at her, and even in the dim light, she could see the depth of emotion in his eyes. "You're thanking me. Olivia, you saved my life. Not literally, maybe, but in every way that matters. Before you came, I was going through the motions, working myself into the ground with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to live, not just exist. You, Emma, and all our children and grandchildren. You're my everything." Tears rolled down Olivia's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "We saved each other, I think. Two people who needed exactly what the other had to offer, finding each other against all odds." "The mail-order bride came with a toddler in tow," Jacob said, the familiar words almost a prayer now. "And the cowboy said, 'Now I have a family complete.' It's still true, you know. After 40 years and all these children and grandchildren, I still feel complete when I look at you. You're still the missing piece I didn't know I needed. And you're still mine," Olivia said. She leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 40 years of love and promises kept. They sat there under the stars, hand in hand, two people who had built an extraordinary life from humble beginnings. Their love had created a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the power of taking chances, of seeing potential where others might see only problems, of choosing love over fear. Jacob and Olivia Young lived for many more years, eventually passing peacefully in their 80s, within months of each other. They had lived to see their family grow to include dozens of descendants, all of whom knew the story of how their family began. And in Montrose, Colorado, the Young ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations. In the main house, now renovated and expanded many times, there hung a photograph of Jacob and Olivia on their 40th anniversary, sitting in their rocking chairs, holding hands, looking at each other with a love that radiated from the image. Beneath the photograph, on a small plaque, were engraved the words that had become the family motto. "The mail-order bride came with a toddler in tow. The cowboy said, 'Now I have a family complete.'" It was a story of courage, of taking chances, of unexpected love in the Wild West. It was the story of how two strangers became partners, how partners became lovers, and how lovers became the foundation of a family that would endure for generations. It was, quite simply, a love story for the ages. And it all began with a desperate woman, a lonely cowboy, and a little girl named Emma, coming together in the spring of 1878 to create something beautiful, lasting, and true.